Hello Linux fans, Rob here and welcome to Linux Quest. Well, this evening I want to talk with you briefly about three different distros, and then I want to drill in and talk about Linux Mint. I think Linux Mint doesn't get the respect that it deserves in many ways. I've watched several videos recently too, various takes on Linux Mint. Recently I'd listened to a podcast with Chris Fisher where they revisited Linux Mint and had some really positive things to say. I'm going to give you a lineup of my top three distros. They're all distinctly different. So let's just kind of run through that. Linux Mint is one of them on the list. And we're going to get into all the reasons why in just a moment there. The other two, and many of you who follow this channel, this won't be a surprise to you, is KDE Neon. There's a multitude of reasons why I like KDE Neon. You get kind of the latest and greatest in Plasma desktop. Kind of bleeding edge as far as Plasma is concerned, that you can kind of go in and add exactly what you want and kind of build it up. And then we have Manjaro Linux. So Manjaro has created, if you will, the easy man's arch. But they've done much more than that. They have taken theming to a whole new level, especially with the XFCE desktop. It's available in a multitude of desktops. In fact, recently I ran it with the Cinnamon desktop. And that brings me over to Linux Mint again, because a few years back, I was one who would have said to you that the Cinnamon desktop felt sluggish, and that I didn't really like the way it was. You could configure it, those kinds of things. It just never was a desktop that was for me. Well, fast forward to today, and that has totally changed. Cinnamon, I think, is absolutely the best on Linux Mint, but I've run it on Manjaro. I have run Linux Mint XFCE, and if I'm going to run Linux Mint, I keep coming back to the Cinnamon desktop. It is quite frankly such an incredibly good combination. So let's kind of dive in, if you will, a little more here on Linux Mint and what I was talking about earlier. I don't think it gets the respect that it deserves. I think a lot of people maybe take it for granted or see it as the beginner's distro. Well, I've been using Linux in one form or another for many, many years, probably longer than some of you who are watching have been alive. It has come so far, and I'm going to flash back to the days where, I got Linux on a disk because you had a 56K modem and you would, try to get a distro downloaded and it would take you all night. Literally, you'd be connected all night and wake up in the morning and hope your connection had stayed strong and that you had what you needed to get your distro up and running. You can have an ISO of your favorite distro and be up and running it. Now, the huge difference back in the day, back when you were getting it on a disk, you had to spend countless hours getting all the drivers and everything set up for all your hardware. So, if you had Broadcom wireless drivers or a Broadcom card in general, graphics drivers, it was such a pain. Fast forward to today and then take Linux Mint, who has packaged everything in a distro that just works. Yes, it's a fantastic distro for a beginner. Is it something that a novice or an experienced Linux user should just ignore? Absolutely not. There are so many reasons why I think anyone who just wants something that works, gets out of the way, but also has, some customizable aspects to it, is fast and fluid, is on a very, very stable base, then Linux Mint is certainly something to look at. So what I want to do tonight, we're going to take it another step. We're going to go through and I'm just going to point out some things within Linux Mint and Cinnamon. I'm going to bounce around a lot. This is not a review. This is really for someone where maybe you've just been reading about Linux or watching videos about Linux, and you obviously have heard Linux Mint or you wouldn't be watching this video, but I've got Linux Quest viewers who tell me that they have used Linux Mint for years and years and never switched, or they keep coming back to it. These are experienced users and they use it because it's so stable. Everything sets up your codecs, Flash, your web browsers all work. Everything just seems to work, and it's really a very user-friendly OS that is just tough to beat. Well-rounded, tough to beat. I would say that it's pretty subtle in the way things are and the way things are laid out. It's not overbearing. It's not trying to be something flashy. It's that, I guess, maybe understated, underappreciated distro. All right, so let's jump over and take a look at a few things. So one of the things I want to talk about is the Cinnamon desktop. There was a time, as I said earlier, where I just was not a fan of the Cinnamon desktop. It felt slow, it felt sluggish. That has been so much improved in the most recent past 2 or 3 versions, that now Linux Mint feels just as fast as maybe XFCE even. You have a menu configuration here that I have modified, but from a right click here, you can customize this menu. You can do things like change the icon here. A lot of this is in the looks department, but if you don't like what you have by default, in this case, we're going to go with the cinnamon symbol, and you'll see that change there. You've got other options here. Open the menu when you move your mouse over it, so we'll go ahead and check that just so you can check that out. We could turn back on the category icons. They're on by default. Show favorites and session buttons. We'll go ahead and turn those on as well, and we'll turn on show recents. A lot of these are on by default. And then from right here, you can edit the menu. So if you've got a list of things here, so for example, programming, I don't need a thing in programming. I'm not a programmer. You could delete that and shorten up your menu or declutter your menu, if you will. If you don't play games, you could turn that off, for example. So quick and easy to do there once you just take a little time to find your way around. Now this is closer to what you would see, and we're going to go backwards some here, but this is closer to what you'd see at first launch. You would not see applications pinned here to the bottom, but that's easy enough to do. So we're going to go in here to sound and video, to library, and we'll right click. Now you've got an option here, add to panel, add to desktop, add to favorites, or uninstall. How many distros have you used where you've got a right click uninstall option right there from within the application launcher? I can't think of any others other than Linux Mint who have that built in. That's a feature very reminiscent of Windows, and anybody moving over from Windows to Linux Mint would find that, useful, and it would be familiar to them. Just so you can see how quick and easy that is to add to the panel. The other thing nice about this panel is that you can left click and simply drag this icon and place it anywhere on the panel. Now with other distributions where you have a panel set up similar to this, many times you have to right click and edit. So for example in the Plasma desktop, you can't just simply drag these icons around. You have to actually go into an edit mode in order to do that. So that makes rearranging things quite simple. Now if we come over here and right click again, you'll see panel edit mode. I want you to notice here this changed colors. It's kind of a blue hue here, and what that's telling you is you're now in edit mode, and you can go into the panel settings and adjust all kinds of things. You could adjust the height of the panel. Well, let me not skip this. You've got auto hide, always show panel, intelligent hide panel, panel height, and then you can set up different settings for the icons here on the left, or anything that's in the center, or anything over here on the right hand side. So you can adjust these icons and symbols and text to make everything look uniform. You can leave it in auto mode if you choose. It's really up to you, but it's extremely flexible in setting this panel up and making sure things are tweaked in. So for example, I've got a few icons here with Chromium, pCloud, NSYNC all set up here. They were much larger than they needed to be, and because you have this flexibility here in the panel, I was able to adjust those down to be more in line with the rest of the icons, with the symbolic icons over here on the right hand side. At the same time, you're able to increase the text of the clock, for example, if that's something you need to do there. So you've got font size, colored icon size, and then symbolic icon size here, where you can adjust things out. So lots of flexibility as far as just the panel and the application launcher are concerned. Then you've got some desktop controls. So if we right click here, you're going to see some options: create new folder, new document, add desklets. And desklets are things like this clock right here. I'm going to left click and drag this over here, for example. And there aren't that many desklets to choose from. You can add additional desklets just by downloading. We'll go ahead and refresh that. We'll go ahead and install weather and just give an idea of what that looks like on the desktop. And then you simply choose the particular desklet or widget, click the plus sign, and you'll see that pop up here. Now there are some options in some of the desklets. In the weather, I don't believe there's an option to remove the background. We'll go to general settings there, and you've got options for no decoration, border only, border, and header. So if we go to border only, you'll see now that there's a background behind the clock. It's not going to change on the weather simply because that particular widget has to have a background. So we're going to go ahead and go back to no decoration. But this is something kind of fun to play around with and experiment and see what might work for you. Go ahead and remove that weather widget. Just wanted you to see how quick and easy it is to set that up. Now we're going to go to customize desktop. Then from here, you're going to find that it's current monitor. You can auto arrange icons, choose which direction for those icons, sort items by name, size, type, or date, and then set up your grid spacing. And what you're going to see by default is computer, home, and trash turned on by default. I turn that off myself because I simply like a much cleaner desktop. I don't like a bunch of icons all over my desktop. Now I want to talk about another aspect on the visual side, on the desktop side. And let's go ahead and turn off edit mode here. And that is under themes. So we'll launch into themes here. And this is one of the things I really appreciate about Linux Mint. At first glance, you're not thinking about it as being that customizable in relation to, say, the Plasma Desktop, where you can virtually change everything within the Plasma Desktop, and it's really fun doing that. Here you've got your basic window borders, icons, controls, mouse pointer, and desktop, and really that's about all you need within the Cinnamon Desktop to really give things a totally different look. So we're going to go ahead and step through that right now. I'm going to change things up quite drastically. We're going to go with Mint Y for your top window border here. And then under icons, I've downloaded a few, but we're going to switch over to one of the Mint icons, and we'll take it over to, say, this yellow here. We'll really change things up. And then we'll go over to a sand color here, Mint Y Sand. We'll change the mouse pointer up, and then we'll go over here to Mint Y Sand again. And just like that, you will see that the icons have changed, and this gives this a totally different look at this point. Now, the background is very easy to change. You've got multiple ways of doing that. I just want to add that there's multiple sets of really attractive high-end wallpapers in place. So we'll go ahead and choose one there. And then that quickly was able to, and some of these icons down here, by the way, you see there's one missing. Some of these icons here will not change or show up until you've logged out and logged back in. But it's extremely quick and easy to change the look, the theming of Linux Mint, so that you can kind of get down to the business of adding or removing software that you need for your system. Now, there's a couple of other things about Linux Mint just from a workflow standpoint. And within Linux Mint, you're going to find everything very organized and easy to understand. You've got backgrounds, effects, font selection, which, oh, by the way, if you wanted to easily install the Microsoft Core fonts, for example, you can do that. You've got themes here again. Account details, applets, desklets, and some of those are limited. I will say that the development on the desklet and applet side is not as full featured as you may find in some other desktop environments. Let's talk about workflow. We're going to go ahead and jump back into panel edit mode. And we're going to go into applets, and from there we are going to add an applet that allows us to bounce from multiple desktops. So we'll have a workspace switcher set up here, and that will pop in here at the bottom. It'll default to 4, and while we're here we'll go ahead and manage workspaces. You see that pop up. While we're here, we'll go ahead and configure that. and we'll go down to simple buttons. And now you have multiple workspaces, so we could bounce around from 1 through 4 here. Let's go ahead and manage that, and you'll see we go into Expo mode. We could name these, delete these, so we could take this down to just 2, for example, and we can quickly switch back and forth. Let's come out of edit mode, and now it will probably allow me to bounce back and forth, although you may not see that on the video. So there is flexibility in that. You've got hot corners that you can set up. Let's go into the software manager. It's laid out very well. There's flat pack support right out of the box. And for the most part, you're going to find as a full-featured library as you'd find in Ubuntu. It's based off of those repositories, and having Flatpak already set up and built in is extremely nice. You've got GDebi set up and in place, so if you want to install a deb file, maybe you can't find what you need here and you find a deb file to download, that makes it simple and easy. The file manager within Linux Mint is fantastic. It's very configurable. You can scale your icons, lots of options in setting up the look of the file manager. One of the things that I use quite a bit, I don't have it set up here, but there's bookmarks. And so you can easily add bookmarks to your favorite folders and or cloud drive spaces and kind of build that out with whatever quick access folders you need. It's quick and easy and very simple to do. Certainly Linux Mint is worth a try. If you haven't looked at it in some time, I highly recommend it. Even if you're an old Linux veteran like myself, there are so many refreshed, finessed, tweaked, improved things within Linux Mint. I think it deserves the attention that it's maybe not getting like it used to. In fact, I used to be guilty of joking about Linux Mint being #1 on Distro Watch forever, and just kind of would make snide remarks about it from time to time. I've totally changed that. I've been donating to the project. I've been using it. I've got 3 different systems set up. I've been using Neon, Mint, and Manjaro, all 3 of those. And I find myself, when I'm like really wanting to get work done, I find myself going to Linux Mint more and more. It's just one of those distros where I feel like it's always going to work. It's always going to be there ready and waiting to just kind of get out of the way and let me get things done. And that's really nice, especially if you're under pressure to, roll through a bunch of tasks and things like that. I understand Canonical with Ubuntu and a big name and a big following and all of that. I would take Linux Mint over Ubuntu hands down any day of the week. It's to me far superior than Ubuntu has thought about being. And yes, I get it. Linux Mint is based off of Ubuntu, and it's pulling from a lot of those really good features in Ubuntu, but it takes it to a whole nother level and does so much more, in my opinion, than Ubuntu is doing. And really their choice of going to the GNOME desktop, that's their choice. It's just, that's not a desktop environment for me. I have tried to go back. There was a time I was into it. I've tried to go back and get back into that. But when you have to start adding all these extensions and everything just to kind of get it to do what, I want it to do, it's not worth it. You can load up Linux Mint and within 15 minutes have everything you need for the most part. Now, if you're doing something with crazy software and that kind of thing, but for a full-featured desktop environment, full-featured OS, you can, within 15 minutes in Linux Mint, have everything running, which is sometimes what you need, but again, hands down above Ubuntu. All right. As I said before, I'm going to wrap this one up because I've rambled on, so I mean it this time. As always, thanks for watching.